morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you. My name's Morgan, and as we begin, just as has been named for many of the different topics of this conference, there's some stuff here that might be potentially difficult to hear. And so just invite folks to take care of themselves. Hearing about the work of racial justice from a white person is always a potentially triggering topic. And so just invite folks to bring me feedback in any way that works for you. I would love to learn from this audience. So just a little overview from where I'm headed today. I'm going to speak a little bit to why this presentation at this conference, share a little bit of my own story, speak to some of the lineage and thinkers behind this work, offer you a description of the pedagogical approach, share some of the impact it's had and the future visions for it. And I wanted to offer first two kind of starting foundational assumptions for what I'm bringing today. The first is that reparations are required in this country for centuries of racial injustice, going back to colonization and slavery as founding sins of this nation. And that grassroots reparative work is one part of the movement that we need to win. And the second assumption is that there is critical healing work that white people need to be doing in caucus with one another in order to go as deep as is required and reduce the harm and labor required of people of color. So why this topic at this conference? What I'm sharing with you today is what I'm thinking about as a pedagogy for surrendering power. And I'm talking about unearned power that comes from white supremacy, that comes from living under racialized capitalism, that's given to people like me, people born white with class privilege in this country. And one thinker that has deeply informed this work, my dear friend, Bronte Velez, who speaks about the pleasurable surrender of white supremacy. So I want to share their words with you. Hopefully the sound is going to work. Something help me share sound.
Bring you to your knees. And I'm at this point of I have this vision of just wanting to see, especially white men in power. I want to see them on their knees and I want to see them give up. And I know they're tired. I know they're so tired. So I want to see them give up and I want to see them release this like exasperated sigh. And I want to see us all feel that release. There's so much to say about it, but I don't think that shame is a generative tool to liberate us. And I don't feel like white people working from that and realizing the histories that they're a part of, I think operating from the place of shame doesn't allow you to actually be accountable. And I think surrender leads us into some other kind of pleasureful accountability and also restorative justice. I'm gonna bring you to your knees.
I'll return to that. Now it's echoing sound. Oh, how about now? I still hear myself coming out of this computer. I just did. I think that fixed it. Hello? Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. So I'll return to that idea of the pleasurable surrender of white supremacy. I wanted to speak to the piece around alternative spiritualities and the way that I've come to think about the spiritual dimension of reparations work. And there's three pieces of that. One, I think about the imperative of reconnecting with ancestors and future generations, with the body, with earth, with emotions, with the unseen world. I love my friend and thinker, Leigh Blakely, offers this circle here for how white supremacy gets replicated through systems of disconnection, unbelonging, and extraction. And the second dimension I'll speak to is how spiritual work can invite us to be with the questions of meaning, purpose, life, death, belonging that are often in the way of white folks surrendering power. And the third piece, and referencing Melissa in the back here, and this conversation around what are our soul ties to white supremacy, and if we're not operating at a level of spiritual depth, can we actually undo the depth at which this is holding on to us? And I have some words here from Larry Ward from the amazing text, America's Racial Karma. And he talks about that we need to be crossing thresholds of healing so that a racialized consciousness may become profoundly humanized. So that's part of what I'm speaking to here. And so I wanted to offer you a little bit of what brings me to this work. I was, as I mentioned, born and raised in a family with much class privilege and long lineage of descent from New England, waspy colonizer folk. I was raised with paintings of ancestors on the wall and a kind of uplifting of the traditional American story. And it was when I was in college that I was politicized initially by the fossil fuel divestment movement. That was when I was first invited to understand the roots of the climate crisis being in white supremacy and in colonialism. And as I thought about it, I saw that very clearly that those stories were the stories of my family and that I needed to look inwards as well as outwards. And that journey eventually led me to living in a multiracial, cross-class, intentional community that Dan mentioned in my introduction. And it was there that I was really invited to see that the movement work I had been doing was not where I needed to be focusing. And I really finally let myself hear the invitation to go do the work with my own people. And I initially had been very resistant to that. I was like, I don't even like white wealthy people. I put a lot of energy into getting away from those worlds. But as I heard that message, I was able to turn my attention to what do I need to do to love those parts of myself enough to see that my people are worth going back for. And that if I don't, there's a way this system will just continue to replicate. And as I did that work, increasingly people would kind of come up to me in the hallway and say, I've never heard anyone talk about the things you just talked about. Can we be in conversation and relationship together? And so that led me to beginning a practice of one-on-one support as well as facilitation of circles for people in those intersections of whiteness and class privilege to look at redistribution and repair in relationship with Black and Indigenous-led social movements. And eventually that work became the topic of my presentation today, which is the Ancestors and Money coaching cohort, which is an 8-month learning journey for white folks with inherited wealth who are either know or have a suspicion that they are descended from colonizers and or enslavers. And I brought that cohort here to HDS with the support of Melissa also, and turned it into a student-led class last semester. This was the poster for the class. And we had 11 students who came together for a semester-long learning journey. So I wanted to offer a little bit of the people and movements and thinkers that are informing me in this work, because none of this came from me. This is all very much what I feel that I've been invited into thinking about and offering at this time. So first, I have a little column of kind of the relationships that I feel are like holding and pushing me in this work. And I won't read them out, but just running through this big list of names for you of the people that I have, the privilege to learn from and be pushed by in this work. And then the people that are my inspiration, the people who I am reading and referencing and learning from, but don't yet have the privilege to be in a relationship with. So an overview of the Ancestors and Money journey is found here. It is based on the spiral of the Work That Reconnects, which is a body of work that comes from Buddhist eco-philosopher Joanna Macy. We begin the journey with a form of self-reflection for all participants, where they're invited to do some truth-telling on what they already know about their families and the money in their families. From there, we get into storytelling and looking at longings, which is a big piece around the antidote to shame being a root motivation for so many white people in justice work, or reaction to the experience of being invited into justice work. And so we look at longings. We look at what is the world that we most want to see, and how do we identify our personal stake in collective liberation, such that the work can be rooted from that rather than a sense of like saving or doing something for someone else. We then move into a practice that I call anti-racist genealogy, which is looking at one's family history through a lens of holding awareness of the violence of our country's history. So uncovering the facts and the stories and finding the dusty old books and cupboards to be like, what did my people do in the story of the formation of this country, and what did they not do? We then look at what are the practices for reconnecting with maybe ancestral traditions that can give us life, that can give us strength. Is there anything between, beneath, behind the violence that we can source something from, so that we don't have to take from the spiritual traditions of others? That process results in the need for much grief work and the process of making ritual space for rage, for sorrow, for shame, for all of that to be shared and vocalized and released is a big part of this work. We then turn to study of what have the historic and contemporary calls for reparations looked like in this country, and what are the current best practices for relating to those movements as people occupying these positions of unearned power. And the latter part of the journey, we widen our circle to welcome a number of Black and Indigenous guest teachers, and also go on field trips to places that are embodying what could become possible. So here's kind of some of the intended takeaways from the cohort. And then this was the translation into HDS course objectives. And then I wanted to just give you a sense of the readings that we're inviting folks into. I'm gonna just show you a lot of pictures really quickly here. But these are some of the like thinkers and that are informing what we're studying and being with in this community. These last two are specific to California because the most recent Ancestors and Money cohort included an in-person retreat at Canticle Farm, the community where I live. And the purpose of that retreat was to see, can the ways in which this community has changed me over the 8 years that I've been there offer something in just a weekend in terms of how community connection can make wealth redistribution possible as we learn to rely on relationships rather than financial resources again? And can the demonstration of what it is to attempt to like live in deep, intimate solidarity. Can that motivate people to find those communities in their own lives? And this is a picture of that group with the Segurite Land Trust, which is a local Indigenous women-led land trust that my community has been in close collaboration with. These are the two like full texts that we added for the Divinity School class. And these are the field trips that we did here in Massachusetts. The class had the privilege to be invited on a Buddhist peace walk that was then in ceremony down with Mashpee Wampanoag folks. And we also had the privilege to visit Kabilia, which is a Black land project in Western Massachusetts. And so to summarize this approach, we begin with identifying our longings and personal stake. We turn towards research and truth-telling, practicing reconnection with earth and spirit, attempting to build white anti-racist culture, grieving the harms caused by our ancestors, studying historic and contemporary calls for reparations, practicing wealth redistribution and divestment, widening the circle of community, and making and witnessing commitments with one another. But I wanted to offer a little bit of what it's been like for people to go through this journey. You can see here, this person talks about one of the most powerful parts being the possibility of holding each other accountable in the work and how that brought belonging, bravery, and inspiration for them. Someone else talked about feeling better able to locate themselves in time, space, history, culture, spirit. Someone else spoke to how the cohort felt them like cycles of decomposition, shedding, transformation, and renewal. And they learned the importance of doing the work in community. This was an HDS student who pointed to their realization that not only are they worthy of healing, but that healing is required, and that they could make the work so much more sustainable when it isn't motivated by fear or shame. And then to speak to some of the tangible impacts of this work from the 4 cohorts that we've had so far, there's been more than $30 million of committed redistribution to Black and Indigenous land projects, people, organizations. That's from 56 participants. And I wanted to put up some of the kind of other forms of action that folks have taken, including on being in the process of figuring out how to rematriate family land, switching to more radical investment advisors to shift money out of the stock market, having difficult conversations with family about what they're learning, meeting with estranged family members to begin healing work for the first time, organizing other family members to take action alongside them, investing from the stock market, organizing with other descendants of shared histories around actions that can be taken in collective ways, and just deepening practices of connection with land, ancestors, and spirit. And so where am I hoping Ancestors and Money goes from here? It feels important to name some of the limitations that have been showing up so far in this work. One of them is that the people showing up are way more young, female, and queer than who actually holds wealth and power in this country. So we're often saying we're here doing this on behalf of our dads, brothers, uncles who are not able to show up to the conversation yet. There's also been constraints of some of these cohorts have been online, on Zoom, some in person, and just continuing to feel a tension between the value of place-based work and the importance of a national conversation. Participants come in different stages of these journeys, knowing that it's nonlinear, cyclical work to unlearn the ways in which we've been acculturated by white superiority, white supremacy culture. Related to that, just the importance of continued structures for learning and accountability for myself and Justine, who've been the core facilitators, and just knowing that white caucus work is both needed and deeply limited, and how do we wrestle with that tension? There's also just the extent of trauma that shows up in this work, both personal and intergenerational, And how do we build our capacity to hold it, both as facilitators and as a collective? And then just naming that this is not even just lifelong work, but intergenerational, centuries-long work. And so the limitations of an intervention that lasts less than a year. And the solidarity economy infrastructure that we need to facilitate mass scale reparative redistribution of money and land is still being built. And there are ways in which I still can't answer people's questions when they say, like, how do I take all of my money out of this and put it towards this? Some of that infrastructure isn't quite there yet. So looking towards the future of this, we're really excited to offer it at universities again, like we had the privilege to do here at HDS. As I mentioned, I live in the Bay Area. I'm really looking for connections to Berkeley and Stanford, if anyone has them. Also thinking about the value of place-based cohorts, which could overlap with that university class vision. And then inspired by one of our communities of accountability, Jubilee Justice, considering what a longer commitment, for instance, a 2-year commitment could mean in this work and what's possible. So I wanted to close just with an excerpt from one of the kind of central prayers or words of meditation that bring us together in this work. Circle round us as we set down legacies of domination, separation, and supremacy. As we set these down, may we pick up life-affirming systems rooted in care and liberation for all beings. As we set down capitalism, white supremacy, and colonization, may we pick up the possibilities of our wholeness and belonging. We are here to recover and reweave a tapestry of balance for our people. We are here for redistribution and reparations. We are here to reveal ourselves to ourselves. We are here to embody a different story, to make different decisions, and live different lives than many who came before us. Thank you.